The glass shattered so loud it sounded like a gunshot in the open, echoing living room. I didn't flinch, but Winter did. I watched her body jump like the sound hit her in the ribs. She was standing at the marble island with one hand hovering near her throat and the other clenched so tight her knuckles went pale against the dark stone. Her silk blouse pulled tight across one shoulder that sat a little too high, like she was bracing for another impact. Declan's voice boomed from the floating staircase, full of power and impatience. He was already storming upward like the whole house existed to get out of his way. Now I'm going to be late for the merger meeting because you can't manage a simple dry cleaning schedule. He didn't look back. He never looked back. Winter's posture folded for one small second, shoulders narrowing under the fabric, then snapped upright again like she'd practiced doing that 1,000 times. She didn't chase him. She didn't argue. She just stared at the spot where he'd been, like she was waiting for permission to breathe again. I was on my knees by the fireplace, adjusting the pilot light on the gas insert with a tool belt heavy on my hips. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was the younger brother, the temporary guest in the pool house, the landscape architect who fixed the things Declan was too rich to touch and too blind to notice. "It's in the closet," Winter whispered, not to him, not to me, to the air. The charcoal suit. It's exactly where he left it. I stood and wiped soot from my hands onto my jeans. The smell of her perfume drifted across the room, vanilla with something darker under it like sandalwood, cutting through the sterile lemon polish smell of Declan's perfect house. My eyes dropped to the vase on the floor, shards of crystal scattered near her bare feet. She started to reach down. "Don't," I said low, stepping in and catching her wrist before her fingers found a sharp edge. My touch was gentle, but it stopped her. Her skin was cold. Winter looked up at me. Hazel eyes, flecked with green, tired in a way that lived under the skin, not on top of it. Her breath stuttered once. Then she steadied it like she forced her body to obey. "I have to clean it before he comes down," she said, voice tight. "I've got it," I replied. I crouched and picked up the broken glass with hands that didn't shake. Years of working with stone, thorns, and sharp tools had taught me how to move slow around danger. Winter stayed still, watching me like she couldn't decide if she should feel embarrassed or relieved. "You didn't have to come over here, Callan," she murmured. "The pilot light was out," I said, keeping my voice calm. "It'll be cold tonight." I dumped the last of the glass into the trash and turned back. She was closer than I expected. Close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her fingers as she tried to hide it by smoothing a wrinkle that wasn't there. Close enough that I could hear Declan's footsteps thudding above us like thunder in the walls. Winter glanced up toward the ceiling, then back at me. Her eyes searched my face, then lingered on the soot smudge on my cheek like it was proof I'd been here doing something real. "I think he doesn't appreciate me," she whispered. The words landed in my chest, not my ears. Her throat moved once like she was swallowing pride. Her voice dropped even lower, almost a confession she wasn't supposed to say out loud. "You're so much kinder." For a second the house felt like it held its breath. The tension that had been simmering for weeks, the quick glances, the quiet moments in doorways, the way she always seemed to relax half an inch when Declan left the room, all of it tightened into one thin line. I should have stepped back. I should have said something safe, something loyal. Instead, I just looked at her and felt my jaw lock with anger that wasn't mine. Declan left 10 minutes later in a rush of expensive cologne and entitlement. He didn't kiss her. Goodbye. He didn't touch her. He grabbed his briefcase, marched to his Porsche, and peeled out of the driveway, leaving wet tire marks like scars on the pavement. The silence after him was heavy. I went back to the guest cottage, but the quiet of the main house followed me anyway. I was stuck on Declan's land for a reason that made me feel small and bitter. My apartment in the city was being torn apart for asbestos removal. 6 weeks of dust and plastic and inspectors. Declan had offered the pool house like it was a generous favor, but really he just wanted free work on the 10 acres of overgrown forest around his glass and concrete estate. That afternoon, I cleared brush near the perimeter wall with a machete. Physical work usually cleared my head. Not today. Every swing landed with the same echo. "You're so much kinder." Around 4, a sleek black sedan rolled up to the gate. I recognized my business partner, Sam, as soon as he stepped out. He looked up at the sky where dark clouds were stacking over the pine line. "You see the forecast?" he asked, voice low. They're calling it an atmospheric river. 60-mile winds. For inches of rain. I said, leaning on the doorframe, trying to clear the drainage before it hits. Sam hesitated like he didn't want to say the next part, then said it anyway. I saw Declan in the city an hour ago. At the Sapphire. My stomach tightened. The Sapphire isn't a merger meeting place, Sam added, watching my face. He was with the redhead from his PR firm. Hand on her thigh. Cozy. For a second my loyalty tried to rise up like it always had when we were kids. Declan was the older brother. The one who carried weight. The one who was always right. But then I pictured Winter flinching at breaking glass, her shoulders folding for 1 second, her whispered words like she couldn't hold them inside. Sam nodded toward the main house. Winter was visible through the floor-to-ceiling glass in the sunroom, sitting at her drafting table like it was the only place she could breathe. Calm face. Tight shoulders. Don't tell her, I said, voice rough. I'm not telling her, Sam replied. I'm telling you. She deserves better, man. He got back into his car and drove off, leaving me with the approaching storm and a secret that felt like a live wire in my hands. I stood there staring at the sunroom, at Winter's profile. The way she rubbed her temple like a headache was already forming. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and texted her. Pressure is dropping. Migraine weather. Drink water. I watched her pause inside that glass box of a room. She picked up her phone, read the message, and something softened in her face. A small, real smile touched her mouth, like it surprised her to feel it. Then she looked out toward the woods and found me instantly. Thank you, Callan, she texted back. The reply shouldn't have mattered. But it did. Because when the first gust of wind hit the pines hard enough to make them groan, I realized I wasn't just worried about the storm anymore. I was worried about what would happen when the power went out, the house went dark, and Winter finally stopped pretending she was fine. The storm hit at sunset like it had been waiting for the right moment to prove a point. The wind slammed into the property so hard the Douglas firs bowed and groaned, their tops whipping like they were trying to break free. Rain came sideways, cold and sharp, stinging my face the second I stepped out of the cottage. I'd barely gotten a pot of water on the stove when the lights flickered once, twice, then died. The hum of the refrigerator cut out. The little space went silent except for the rain hammering the roof. My phone buzzed in the dark. Declan. Power lines down on the highway, his message read. Bridge is closed. Staying in the city tonight. Make sure the generator kicks on for the wine cellar. Don't let my vintage cab spoil. No mention of Winter. No question. Just the wine. Something hot and ugly rose in my chest. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I shoved the phone into my pocket and grabbed my heavy flashlight and waterproof jacket. The wind was deafening when I stepped outside. Rain hit like gravel. The path to the main house turned into a slick ribbon of mud, and the motion lights didn't come on because the power was out. The only light was my flashlight beam slicing through the storm. The backup generator was humming by the time I got there. I could hear it through the walls, that deep mechanical thrum that meant the essentials were protected. The security system, the fridge, the climate control for Declan's precious wine cellar. But the main living areas were dark. I punched in the code and stepped inside. The house felt wrong without its usual glow. The marble and glass disappeared into shadows. The air was colder than it should have been, like the building was holding its breath. Winter, I called. Her voice came from the kitchen. In here. She stood by the counter trying to light a candle, but her hands kept slipping. The lighter sparked and died, sparked and died. She wore an oversized cardigan over her blouse, arms wrapped around her middle like she could keep the cold out by sheer will. Declan isn't coming home, she said, not looking at me. He texted. I know, I said. I took the lighter from her shaking fingers and flicked it once. The flame caught. I lit the candle and set it between us. The small circle of warm light made her face look softer, but it also showed things she couldn't hide. The tired shadows under her eyes. The tightness in her jaw. The bridge is out, I said. Is it? Winter finally looked up. Her eyes were steady on my face, not pleading. Or is that just convenient? I didn't answer. I couldn't defend him anymore. A loud crack echoed from above, followed by the sound of metal tearing. Winter grabbed my arm hard. What was that? Stay here, I said. I moved toward the living room, my flashlight beam catching flashes of the space as I went. The wind howled against the windows like a living thing. Near the fireplace, I saw it. a thin dark line spreading across the hardwood. Water. The wind had ripped a section of copper flashing off the chimney. Rain was finding its way in. Before I could grab a bucket, something slammed into the side of the house. Wood on glass. A sharp shriek followed as the security alarm started chirping, tripped by the sudden movement. Winter appeared in the doorway, clutching the candle like it was the only weapon she had. That sounded like a tree, she breathed. Stay behind me, I said. I shouldered the patio door open and stepped into rain that hit so hard it made my skin ache. A heavy limb had snapped and pinned itself against the sunroom frame. The outer pane was cracked, spiderweb lines spreading, but it hadn't shattered yet. The alarm kept chirping, relentless. Behind me, Winter didn't freeze. She moved fast, barefoot on cold tile, and punched the keypad code to silence the system. Then she shoved a thick blanket into my arms. Wrap the glass, she ordered. Then we brace it from inside. I blinked at her, impressed despite everything. Okay. We taped the blanket across the cracked pane using painter's tape from her studio. Winter's hands were steady now, all her fear funneled into action. Then we shoved the heavy dining table against the frame as a brace. The house stopped sounding like it was coming apart 1 inch at a time. Only then did I hear the softer threat. The drip turning into a steady patter near the fireplace. We have a leak, I called. I know, Winter said, already moving. She came back with a bucket and towels like she'd been waiting for the moment someone finally took the problem seriously. We rolled up the expensive rug, dragged it away from the wet spot, and set the bucket under the drip. The house, usually so big and cold it felt like a museum, suddenly felt small. Just the two of us against the roar outside. The generator isn't connected to heating in the guest wing, I said, feeling the temperature dropping. My cottage is going to be freezing. The main fireplace is gas, Winter said, breath puffing slightly in the candlelight. But the starter is electric. I can bypass it, I said. Her eyes lifted. You can. I nodded. But we need to stay in this room. It's the only one we can warm. Winter looked into the vast shadowed hallways, then back at me. Okay, she said quietly. It was such a simple word, but the way she said it made my chest tighten. Like she was agreeing to more than a room. Like she was admitting she needed someone. I knelt by the fireplace and pulled the panel, my flashlight beam aimed at the wiring. It took 10 minutes and a careful jump, and then the pilot caught with a soft whoosh. The flame appeared like a miracle. Warmth started to creep into the room. Winter sank down onto the floor near the hearth, pulling a quilt around her shoulders and then around her knees like she was trying to shrink her body into safety. You should sleep in the guest room, she said after a while. I have heavy quilts. I'm not leaving you alone in a house that's leaking and cracking, I replied. I'll take the couch. Her eyes flicked to the dark hallway, then back to me. Callan, it's not proper. The word hit like a slap. Proper. Like her life was a set of rules meant to keep her in place. Declan wouldn't like it, she added. Declan isn't here, I said before I could stop myself. Then I softened my voice because the anger was sharp enough to cut us both. And he cared about his wine more than your heat. Winter's fingers tightened on the quilt. She stared at the fire like she could burn the truth into it. Why do you stay? She asked suddenly. I blinked. What? Why do you stay here? She clarified, eyes still on the flames. With him. With this. You could leave. I thought about the asbestos abatement. The dust. The plastic. Declan's offer that wasn't an offer. The way he spoke to me like I was a useful tool. I'm stuck, I admitted. For now. Winter let out a slow breath. So am I. The words sounded like surrender, but when I looked at her, I saw something else under it. A kind of quiet rage. A woman who had been holding herself together for too long. She reached for the sketchbook sitting on the side table like it was the only thing in the room that belonged to her. The cover was worn at the corners, carried through too many moves. As she pulled it onto her lap, an old envelope peeked out from the back, creased and tucked tight under a rubber band. The stamp caught the firelight. Galleria sale. I didn't mean to stare, but my eyes snagged on it like a hook. Winter noticed instantly. Her thumb pressed over it, protective. That's old, she said, voice low. What is it? I asked, keeping my tone neutral like I was asking about weather. She hesitated, then slid the envelope back just enough that I could see the faded return address. My father sold his gallery before he passed, she said quietly. That check is the money he bled for. My throat tightened. You never cashed it. She shook her head. It feels like if I use it, I admit my life belongs to Declan. Like I needed him to make it matter. The fire popped. The sound landed like punctuation. Winter pushed the envelope back into the sketchbook and held it against her chest like she was holding the last piece of herself. My family loves him, she added, voice tight. He saved my father's gallery once. That's the story everyone tells. So I stay. I keep the peace. You don't owe him your oxygen, I said. Winter's breath caught. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a second, the walls between us didn't feel thick enough. Outside, the wind screamed again, rattling the windows. And in the small circle of firelight, I realized the storm wasn't the only thing that could bring this house down. The way Winter was looking at me now, like kindness was something she could fall into, felt just as dangerous. Because I didn't just want to keep her safe. I wanted to pull her out of the life that was crushing her. And I knew the second I did that, Declan would come for both of us. The storm didn't ease overnight. It got meaner. Wind kept slamming the house in hard bursts like it was trying to pry every seam apart. Rain kept finding new ways in. Somewhere down the ridge a tree fell with a crack that made Winter stiffen beside me, even though we were inside and warm now. Warm was a relative word. The fire did its job, but the rest of the house stayed cold and hollow. The big room swallowed sound. Every creak of wood made Winter's shoulders lift. I should have gone back to the cottage. I told myself that twice. But every time I pictured her alone in a dark house while the wind clawed at the windows, my feet stayed planted. Winter sat on the couch under the quilt, sketchbook on her lap, like armor. I stayed on the floor near the hearth with my back against the sofa, pretending the distance made this safer. It didn't. When the fire popped, Winter flinched. Then she caught herself and exhaled slow, like she was forcing her body to remember it wasn't a voice being raised behind her. I turned my head slightly. You okay? She didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the worn edge of the sketchbook. You know what the worst part is? She said finally, voice quiet. I don't even know when I started doing that. Flinching. Like it's normal. My jaw tightened. It's not normal. Winter's laugh was short and dry. It's my normal. The generator hummed outside like a distant animal. Somewhere in the walls, a pipe knocked from pressure changes. The house felt alive in all the wrong ways. I pushed up to my feet. I'm going to check the perimeter, I said. Make sure nothing else is threatening the roof. Winter's eyes lifted fast. In this weather? I'll be quick. Her hand tightened on the quilt. Then she nodded once, like she hated herself for caring, but couldn't stop. Lock the door, she said. And be careful. The way she said it, like my body mattered to her, hit me harder than the wind. Outside, the rain slapped my face and soaked me in seconds. I moved along the side of the house with the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air smelled like wet pine and mud. The ground was slick, and the wind shoved at my shoulders like it was testing my balance. I found a branch hanging over the guest wing roof, cracked, but not fully fallen. I cut it loose with my folding saw, watching it drop into the brush with a heavy thud. When I came back inside, Winter was standing by the window. She didn't pretend she wasn't watching for me. She turned as soon as I shut the door, her shoulders dropping half an inch like she'd been holding them up. You're soaked, she said. Yeah, I replied. It's a storm. She crossed the room without thinking and grabbed a towel from the closet. Then she stopped, like the action startled her, like she realized she was carrying out loud. Winter handed it to me anyway. Our fingers brushed. Heat climbed up my arm from that small contact, ridiculous and instant. Thank you, I said. Winter looked at my face, then down at the towel, then back up again. Her eyes stayed too long on my mouth before she forced them away. The room went quiet. The storm hammered the windows, and the silence between us filled with things neither of us wanted to say. I dried my hair with the towel and turned back to the fireplace, trying to give her space. But Winter didn't move back to the couch. She stayed where she was, near me, close enough that I could feel her presence like warmth. I used to paint, she said suddenly. I glanced back. Paint. Before Declan, she said, voice flat. Before this house, before the board, before the donors. I wanted to be a painter. Real galleries. Real work. Not being someone's accessory. My chest tightened. Why'd you stop? Winter's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, like she could hear Declan even when he wasn't here. He said it was childish. A hobby. He said if I wanted to be taken seriously as his wife, I needed to stop acting like an artist and start acting like a partner. Her lips pressed together, so I painted over everything. I didn't know what to say to that without sounding like a man offering solutions to a woman who had been surviving. So I didn't offer a speech. I walked to the side table and picked up her sketchbook gently, like it was fragile. I set it on the coffee table between us like it belonged there. Charcoal is right there, I said, nodding at the hearth where she kept supplies. Paper's in your studio. Winter stared at the sketchbook like it might bite her. Then she reached for it slowly, like she was reclaiming something she'd left behind. She went to her studio and came back with a pad and a stub of charcoal, her steps careful like she didn't want to wake the house. She sat cross-legged on the rug by the candlelight. Her fingers moved fast, black dust smearing along the side of her thumb. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask if it was good. She just drew like she was breathing. I sat on the couch, watching her, trying to pretend this wasn't the most intimate thing I'd seen in a long time. When she finally turned the pad toward me, my stomach dropped. It was me. Not a perfect portrait. Not polished. But it caught something I didn't know I showed. Strong shoulders, yes. But my eyes looked softer. Alert. Like a man who listened for trouble and stood between it and the people he cared about. My throat went tight. Is that how you see me? Winter's gaze held mine. That's who you are, she said. The words didn't feel like flattery. They felt like a fact she'd been holding in her mouth for weeks. She set the charcoal down. Her fingers were stained black. She didn't wipe them. She didn't hide them. Winter leaned forward a fraction, then stopped. Waiting. The air between us tightened. My hand lifted to her jaw, thumb brushing the edge of her cheekbone. Light touch. Nothing that trapped her. Her breath caught, fast and sharp. Tell me to stop, I said quietly, forehead almost touching hers. Because I can't stop myself. Winter's fingers fisted in my gray t-shirt and pulled me closer. Don't stop, she whispered. I kissed her. Not careful. Not greedy. Just honest. It felt like the storm outside had finally found its way into my chest, and instead of tearing me apart, it lit me up. Winter inhaled sharply and held on like she'd been waiting for someone to choose her without conditions. Her mouth softened against mine, then pressed harder, like she was making a decision with her whole body. We broke apart breathing hard, eyes locked. And then the room snapped bright. Power surged back on. The chandelier blazed overhead like it had been waiting to expose us. The security system beeped once and settled. Winter jerked back, hand flying to her mouth, like she could shove the moment back into her body. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Declan. Roads are clearing. Be home in an hour. Have dinner ready. Winter stared at the screen like it was a loaded gun. Her breath turned shallow. He can't know, she whispered, panic sliding into her voice. Callan, he can't know. I sat up slowly, pulse still racing from her mouth on mine. I'm not hiding, I said, but even as I said it, I saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of being caught kissing someone. Fear of what Declan would do when he realized he wasn't in control. Winter grabbed the sketchbook and the charcoal with shaking hands, stuffing them away like evidence. She moved fast, erasing, folding blankets, wiping surfaces, shoving the wine bottle into the sink, trying to make the room look like nothing had happened. It hit me then. This wasn't just a marriage that was unhappy. This was a life Winter had been trained to survive. I reached for her wrists, stopping her frantic hands. Winter, I said low. Look at me. Her eyes were wet, but furious. He'll destroy you, she hissed. He'll sue you. He'll ruin your business. He'll cut me off. He'll take everything. I don't care about his money, I said. I do. She snapped back. Then her voice broke into something softer and more terrifying. Because I care about you. For a second, all the anger drained out of me, replaced by something raw. A car engine sounded faint outside, tires on wet pavement. Winter flinched like the sound was a whip. Go, she whispered. Please, go to the cottage. He can't find you here. My body wanted to refuse. My pride wanted to fight. But Winter's fear wasn't drama. It was experience. So I nodded once. I'm not leaving you, I said. I'm stepping back so you don't get hurt worse. Winter's eyes squeezed shut like she hated the choice. I walked out into the rain again, heart pounding, and headed for the guest cottage. Halfway down the path, I heard the Porsche. Declan's headlights swept across the trees. And I knew the storm inside this family was about to get even more violent. Declan came home like the storm followed him. His Porsche rolled up the drive with the kind of speed that made gravel spit. The headlights cut across the trees, the wet ground, the glass walls of the house. For a second, the place looked like a stage again. Bright, clean, controlled. I watched from the cottage window with my jaw tight and my hands curled into fists I didn't remember making. I wasn't scared of Declan's temper. I was scared of the way Winter moved around it. I waited 10 minutes. Then 20. Enough time for him to walk inside, toss his coat, demand food, and start noticing what he wanted to notice. My phone buzzed. Winter, are you awake? Yes, I typed back. A pause. Then 3 words that turned my stomach. He's in a mood. I stared at the message and felt my chest tighten. I typed and erased 3 different replies before settling on the only one that mattered. Are you safe? Another pause. Then, for now, I didn't like those words. Not because they were dramatic, but because they sounded practiced. I pulled on my boots and jacket again, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out into the rain. The wind had eased, but everything was wet and slick. The path up to the main house felt longer than it had earlier, like the land itself was trying to slow me down. When I entered, the house was bright and warm again, but the warmth felt fake, like it was only there because the generator and money demanded it. Declan was in the kitchen, already in a fresh shirt, hair perfect, acting like he hadn't just abandoned the property in the worst storm of the year. Winter stood at the stove, back in her role, hair pinned, face smooth, hands moving like a machine. Declan didn't look at her. He looked at his phone. This coffee is cold, he said, holding the mug out in the air. Microwave it. Winter reached for it. Her fingers paused on the handle for a half-second like it burned. Then she took it anyway. Sorry, she said quietly. Declan's eyes flicked up and landed on me like I was a tool he'd forgotten he owned. Callan, he said, voice loud in that polished way he used when he wanted to remind someone who was in charge. Did you fix the leak? I saw water stains near the fireplace. It's handled, I said. Good, he replied, already bored. Also, check the wine cellar. I need it at 55. If I lose a bottle because you didn't monitor the generator, I'm billing you. I stared at him. The words pressed against my teeth like they wanted out. Winter kept her eyes on the stove. Declan turned back to his phone. Gallery opening on Friday. Big donors. Winter, try not to embarrass me. We're something less severe. People don't like frost. Winter's jaw tightened so hard I saw it from across the room. Her eyes lifted to mine for one fast second. Help. Not the word. The look. And something in me snapped clean. Declan, I said. He glanced up, annoyed. What? You don't talk to her like that, I said, voice flat. The kitchen went still. Winter froze with the spatula midair. Declan's mouth curved into a smile that wasn't friendly. Excuse me. You heard me. Declan set his phone down slowly, like he was choosing to be calm. You're living on my property, he said. You're eating my food. And you want to lecture me about how to speak to my wife. Winter flinched at the word wife like it was a chain. I felt the rage rise again, but I forced my voice to stay level. You didn't check on her once last night. Declan laughed, short and sharp. She's fine. The generator kept running, didn't it? That's what matters. Winter's face didn't move, but I saw her swallow. That was the moment I knew there was no safe version of this anymore. Declan leaned back against the counter. You're getting bold, little brother. You forget your place. I know my place, I said. I'm the one who fixes what you break. Winter's breath caught. Declan's smile vanished. His eyes hardened. Careful, he said. I can make you disappear. You and your little landscaping business. Don't confuse your temporary stay here with importance. Winter turned away, shoulders tight, like she couldn't watch him crush me too. I stepped closer to Declan. Not threatening. Just close enough to make him look at me fully. You can threaten me all you want, I said. But you're not going to threaten her into silence anymore. Declan's gaze flicked toward Winter. You hearing this? He asked her. My brother thinks he gets a vote in my marriage. Winter set the spatula down slowly. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. She turned to him, and she didn't apologize. I'm tired, she said, voice quiet but clear. I'm tired of being spoken to like a problem. Declan blinked like he didn't understand the sound of her voice, not shaped for him. This is not the time, he snapped. It's always the time, Winter replied, and the words shocked even me. She took a breath. You broke a vase today. You screamed at me. You left in a storm. You texted about wine. Not once did you ask if I was okay. Declan's face flushed. You're being dramatic. Winter's eyes flicked to me, then back to him. No, she said. I'm being honest. Declan's jaw flexed. He stepped closer to her. Lower your voice. Winter didn't back up, but I saw the fear in her posture. It was there, buried under courage. I moved without thinking, stepping between them. Declan's eyes narrowed. Get out of the way. No, I said. Winter's hand touched my back, just one palm, steady, not pulling me away, anchoring me. Declan stared at her hand like it was a betrayal. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face shifted from anger to calculation. Whatever, he said sharply, turning away. I have work. I'm not doing this tonight. He grabbed his phone and walked out of the kitchen like she was a meeting he didn't care to attend. The second he was gone, the air changed. Winter's knees looked like they might give. I turned to her. Are you okay? Winter pressed her hand to her chest like she was checking if her heart was still there. I don't know, she whispered. I've never said no to him like that. I wanted to pull her into my arms. I wanted to erase the fear from her face with my hands. But I remembered what she'd said. He'll destroy you. So I stayed still, giving her space to choose. Winter looked at me, eyes wet, voice barely there. That kiss, she said. It was real. My throat went tight. Yeah. And it was a mistake, she added, but her voice didn't match the words. I shook my head. It wasn't a mistake. Winter's breath hitched. She looked toward the hallway like she expected Declan to return and punish her for breathing wrong. Then she looked back at me. I don't know how to leave, she whispered. The words felt like a door cracking open. I stepped closer, slow. You don't have to know everything tonight, I said. You just have to know you're not alone. Winter's eyes searched my face like she was trying to decide if kindness was another trap. Then her shoulders sagged. She reached up and touched my cheek, wiping away a smear of soot that had somehow come back. Her fingers lingered. You're so much kinder, she whispered again, and this time it wasn't confession. It was grief. I covered her hand with mine. You deserve kind, I said. Not sometimes. Always. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Winter flinched, pulling her hand back like she'd been burned. He's coming, she breathed. I glanced toward the stairs. Go to your room, I said. Lock the door. Winter's eyes widened. And you? I'll handle him, I said. She stared like she didn't want to leave me in front of the fire. Then she nodded once and slipped away down the hall, quiet as a shadow. Declan came back into the kitchen a minute later, phone in hand, expression annoyed like he'd just remembered we existed. Where is she? He asked. She went to bed, I said. Declan scoffed. She's sulking. She's exhausted. Declan's eyes sharpened. You're talking like you're her husband. I didn't blink. I'm talking like I'm a decent man. Declan stepped closer, voice dropping. What did you do? He hissed. You touch her. My stomach clenched. I kept my face calm. If you're looking for someone to blame for your own neglect, look in the mirror. Declan's hand lifted like he might shove me, but he stopped. Not because he was kind, because he was calculating. He smiled again, slow and ugly. You think you can play hero, he said. I can ruin you with one call. Terra firma. Your permits. Your clients. I can make sure you never work in this state again. I stared at him, then nodded once. Do it. Declan blinked, thrown off. What? Do it, I repeated. And then explain to your donors and your board why you're punishing your brother for fixing your house during a storm while you were at a hotel. Declan's mouth tightened. He didn't like being cornered by facts. He leaned in, voice like poison. I know things about you, he said. Things you don't want public. I held his gaze. And I know things about you, I said quietly. Things Winter doesn't even know yet. Declan's eyes flickered. Just once. That flicker told me everything. He wasn't scared of me. He was scared of what she might find out. Declan straightened his shirt like he was wiping the moment away. This conversation never happened, he said. Sure, I replied. He turned and walked out again, leaving the kitchen smelling like expensive cologne and threat. When the house finally went quiet, I stood alone by the fire with my heart pounding. Winter didn't come back down, and I didn't go after her, because I knew the next step couldn't be another secret kiss in candlelight. The next step had to be a plan, a real one, a way to pull her out without letting Declan crush her for trying. I went back to the cottage just before dawn. I didn't sleep. I sat at the small table with my laptop open, searching for attorneys, scanning divorce statutes, reading about financial freezes and protective orders. At 7, my phone buzzed again. Winter. Can you come to the sunroom? I drove up to the house with my stomach tight, expecting anything. When I walked in, Winter was standing by the glass wall, looking out at the wet trees. She wasn't in silk or heels. She was in a simple sweater and leggings, hair loose, face bare. Real. She turned when she heard me. I found something, she said. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. She held out Declan's tablet. On the screen was a message thread. A redhead's name. A photo. Declan's hand on her thigh. A hotel room key card on the bed. Winter's eyes met mine. You knew, she said softly. The words didn't sound like anger. They sounded like hurt. I swallowed hard. Sam told me. Winter's lips pressed together. She nodded once like it matched what she already suspected. Then she lifted her chin. Pack a bag, she said. My heart slammed. Winter. I'm leaving, she said, voice clear. Today. The decision hit the room like a door being kicked open. Where will you go? I asked. Winter stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell her vanilla perfume even without the silk. Somewhere safe, she said. Then, softer, eyes locked on mine. Are you coming with me, Callan? And I realized the storm had never been about weather. It had been about this moment. The moment she stopped surviving and started choosing. And the moment I had to decide if I was brave enough to stand beside her when Declan came for blood.
If this story stays with your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends.